Sangye chwe dan soge chonam la chanchu parto dani kyapsu. Dage jin zo ye be chonam ge rola panjira sangye ndo paras. Sangye chwe dan soge chonam la chanchu parto dani kyapsu. Dage jin zo ye be chonam ge rola panjira sangye ndo paras. Sangye chedan soge chonam la chanchu pardo dani kyapsan. Age jinso yebe sonam rola panjire sangye ndo parasho. Samjan tamje dewa devi gyudan dembara gyuchi. Samjan tam dungal dan dungal ge gyudan tawara. Samjan tamje dungal mebe dewa dan mindawa. Samjan tamje nirin chadan nidan cha nyamla nebara gyuruji. Samjan tam dewa dan dewe gyudan dambara gyuji. Samjan tam dungal dan dungal ji gyudan tawara gyuji. Samjan tamje dungal mebe dewa dan mindawa. Samjan tamje nirin chadan nidan cha nyamla nebara gyuruji. Samjan tam dewa dan dewe gyudan dambara gyuji. Samjan tam dungal dan dungal ji gyudan tawara. Samjan tamje dungal mebe dewa dan mindawa. Samjan tamje nirin chadan nidan cha nyamla nebara gyuji. Samjan tam dewa dan dewe gyudan dambara gyuji. Samjan tam dungal dan dungal ji gyudan tawara. Samjan tamje dungal mebe dewa dan mindawa. Samjan tamje nirin chadan nidan cha nyamla nebara gyuji. Sachibyo ji juji me do re ro le ji nye de ya ambondi sangye jindu me dembu oi gönanda yin la chöba idam guru rana mandala kani atayani.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground, spread with incense, adorned with strewn flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus, meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate the virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Niram Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryata Yami.
Ange to jingi zungwa dawa tanje bambi shiri tambe chini tanje ve kodam te la cha cha lo. Ya, ta trinyang mazo kanga di ruru je kokap chi chungre. Ta ngone tende di kan la. Ta mazo ruru je da ta su di mare ta kanche mazo chi chingen je ko 쿵 제 생긴 집에 저러지 차거래. 근데 시 생긴 제야 돼. 추수 송마송데 또 군롱라라 알래. 군롱데. 가제 군롱 장주기 셈당 동이 또 따와 짐베 원에 취 생긴 간디제바이나 이 추수 누구 알아? 와다 때마다 추수로에 백하고래스.
Mm-hmm. And so today, once again, we have another opportunity to come together, to gather together. And yet this is just not without any meaning or for no reason, actually. We have come together under the intent of studying the Dharma, of speaking about the Dharma. But actually, whether something becomes the Dharma or not, actually this all depends on one's own motivation, on one's aim. If one comes together to listen to the Dharma with the compassion of Bodhichitta and holding the wisdom of emptiness, so with these two, then whatever the discussion is, it will indeed become the Dharma. But other than this, holding bodhicitta and wisdom of emptiness, it's very difficult for something to really be true and authentic Dharma.
Nyumungpu nyimbo royena shiresi. Nyumungpu nyimbo mandona shi marizir sungresi. Dindi gala nganazo nyenshi jebada nyumung nyimbo rotubaji guguare.
Ani suki drontampala?
Geshe potowa.
Geshe potowa.
Geshe potowa sede gavishi nyim potowa chimbode ani dromtambage ngonlopterwa lomade.
Oh, lasso.
George Pata Adishak Lomade, Dromtombe Lomade, Rishi Potoa Asset, Kungre. Potoa Gitai, Kona Yagan de la Jury, Chida Chumaimbe, Natiam, Chida Chumaimbe, some the candidates, the Gala, Lendela, any Numumbu Nimbon Ruguena, the Churis, Numon the Rugun, Numumbi Nimbon Rugumena, Chumaris or something. Ta Japare.
And so, Geshe Potoa, who was a disciple of Drontompa, and Drontompa was the disciple of Lord Atisha. And so Drontompa's disciple one day asked him, Master, what is it that actually is the dividing line between what is the Dharma and what is not the Dharma? Where is the division? And when Drontompa answered his disciple, he said, the division line is whether or not it is an antidote to the afflictive emotions. If this discussion, if this Dharma is an antidote to afflictive emotions, then this is the Dharma. if this subject matter does not act as an antidote to the negative, afflicting emotions, then this is not the Dharma. And so the dividing line is thus. And so as we come together for our discussion, let's make sure that this discussion does indeed stay focused towards to being an antidote to the afflictive emotions, because as Geshe Patoa did say, the borderline between what is Dharma and what is not Dharma is whether it serves to act as an antidote, to counteract the afflictive emotions.
Attendi ligala ngaranzo drum dem badang ani podo jinju chadi ore. Tendi ligala so chede seade changa zigboda ke tulo ani pe zigboda ko ani tu sumi zum deba samji chudun romindo ni zore. Gaje defaji chibayina nga chitangi nanda mane tangi nanda semji kegi nanda nyomu pe nyembo jin ro thuji buware. Digi nyomu shu chung rugu yana semde na chungru ngamale semde na chungru namjo ina cheru oda jempe ina cheru jin rugu yana rang jinji ina tos chung rugu yana teni tangone to nga chu chu jeba de jego chobare pendo yongore 제가 준준하나 란친딘 시부지 넘거서 까난기도와 뇽몰라니 란친딘 슈충 땅거레스 아니 란친딘 슈충 땅거 가르잖아 란친딘 되게 뇽몬도 뿌이다보지 거와 뇽몬도 메아서가 탑실라 란친딘데 배 슈충 땅거레스 대순 거와 아요는 통용 거래 된디가라 뺨미스베 개점 자디거래 오다 데인디가 랑가서 뒤윤도 녀몬 가서 두두 충루 누구도 엔도 타이 타와데 뱀미스 개침부 차디요레스.
And so now we really find ourselves in the very same arena as Geshe Patoa and his teacher Drontompa, where we come together in the Dharma and yet we look to make sure that it is authentic Dharma. Because we're here under the auspices of a Dharma teaching, and although it may be titled a Dharma teaching and one may wear fine Dharma clothes and Dharma robes, and one may close their eyes in a meditative posture, and although the topic may be about self-clinging or reciting mani mantras or cultivating the mind of bodhicitta, unless this serves to diminish one's negative emotions so that they become lesser than before, so they become less strong than before, so one's wisdom and intelligence increases and one's self-cherishing decreases. That's what makes it the Dharma. That's when what is taught actually becomes the Dharma. And so in this text, the Bodhisattva-avatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, really one of the principal topics in this text from Shantideva is indeed to relinquish this self-cherishing attitude and to apply practices that act as contraindications towards afflicting mental states. This is what we really need to focus on. And this is what's so important. And so actually we need to constantly work at it so that decreasing afflictive emotions becomes a regular practice and becomes stabilized.
뇽모 스테디가라 셈 rabdu majiba 셈 투버제바 셈 날도 많이 베체겐질라 핸디 심중질라 뇽모 시거와 코랑 시 코랑 민 코랑 베 너 님보지미도 semgiranjinde 왜 dimme male paze semgiranjinde hajang zangmare 제상 딜라니 배 디 라진데 투버 지금 건지 샘 라진 마기버서 건지 이나 따뜻해서 오야지 오늘 기전도 가지 딘두가라 녀몰 카드자와 녀몰라 견도 딱 와대 미시베 규진 첨부하래 삼로야보 땅나 규진 통그래 삼로마다나 오다티 유된 소리잖아 또 녀몬들 연된 돈인가요 그러다 mi maji ta nyomola yonden ta gorwa
So we have this term which is afflictive emotions or disturbing emotions. And the definition of disturbing emotions is that which brings the mind to a state devoid of peace, a mind that is agitated, and a mind that does not settle into its own natural essence. And so this single word, afflictive emotions, this is something that we really need to look at and very much understand what this means. When we talk about this essence of mind or nature of mind, the intrinsic mind is completely untouched, untainted by any stains. It is complete purity. That is the nature of the mind. And when we looked at the definition of afflictive emotions, we said that it is an agitated mind where one cannot settle into that essence as it is. And so we see that the disturbing emotions cloud this completely pure, stainless mind. And so now we have reason to find fault with afflicted mental states. It completely clouds this stainless, pure, untainted nature of mind. And so we should look to constantly cut the afflictive emotions. We should really focus on that. We should constantly find fault and see that they are wrong and see what is the problem with a mind that is non-peaceful, that is afflicted, that is clouded, that cannot relax into its own nature. And we really need to think about that. And if we think about the reason, if we think about it, now we have good reason to know why we need to work on eliminating afflictive emotions. But if we don't think about it, if we don't contemplate that reason, we could really come to the point where we find some quality, some good quality, some positiveness in being discursive and afflicted. Actually, many people find it a favorable mental state. They actually find some good qualities in afflictive emotions. But if we think about it, we will find out exactly why we need to cut them off and why we need to have them diminished.
진짜 남배 중에 심중들라 리니체네 심중 리지 심기엔된 레스 잠바당 재와당 미다바 토벨로당 통니 토벨로 되게 심기엔된 레스
같이 잠바당 닌제당
잠바 닌지 미다바 토벨로 통니 토벨로 라메베 토벨로 되게 심중 되게 간가 심기엔된 레스 가르잖아 코 코멘치리 샘데 지설 누구 와래 인디가라 샘기 연된 레스 나랑 다 들어와 연된기 차대 렘바이나 미데 남주 차로 누구 와 왔다 데리스 아니 너차 공pro 마얄 마리바스긴데 다 녀모모 게디지동 되게 샘기 껴레스 코 샘에는 삐거마도 코여이나 샘데베 머롱 차도 오래 현진 차도 오래 현담 달고 오래스 현담 달로 콜을 껴들다는 코 삐거마도 코 마비발라 샘 장마용에 요 말을 거와 빈낭베 중장장 라고 말도 수박 강갈론 때 라고 말다 nang be jung so te na ne nalente jinju ji ki ta te lab gore ta misibe ke chimbore.
So within the studies of Buddhism, when we look at the studies of the mind, we have the mind and its mental activities, the mental activities of the mind. And actually there are some mental thoughts, mental activities and engagement that are actually considered positive qualities, such as love, compassion, the mind that understands impermanence, the mind that realizes emptiness, the mind that realizes selflessness. All of these are activities or mental actions that are considered positive when it comes to the Buddhist texts. And the reason for this is when we employ these kinds of mind and mental states, what happens is the mind becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. And therefore, this is why these kinds of mental states are called positive qualities. And so we can see that in the aspect of positive qualities, these are things that bring an intelligence and brilliance and clarity to the mind. But rather, the other kinds of mind states, and mental functions, such as clinging attachment, hatred and anger, pride and envy, dullness and ignorance, or whatever of the 84,000 different kinds of negative emotions, these are considered faults of the mind rather than qualities of the mind, because they cause discord within the mind. They cause disturbance within the mind. And so what we need to do is we need to separate ourselves from these faults of the mind. And we actually need to work to do this. So we almost have to kick them out. We have to get rid of them in order to come to clean and clarify this mind. So it's really only within the profound Buddhist texts that focus on looking at the mind and its different kinds, dividing the mental states like this. And with all of these commentaries and so forth, the profound commentaries of the teachings of Nalanda, such as this commentary that we're reading now, the Bodicharyaavatara.
Tendi degala ngarazo gindu samlo tangena rathoya yore ngazo jambadang ninjidang tendi ki chuma chamji zinyon degala semda haja kebo nen nawa rikpa tangpo yongudwa ngazo nyoytubudwa ani docha kontro tendi kontro kundu kiryon degala ani ngama chik samlo ki yabuji khondegene te khaptuda Tata jeje ni pet na thomse ro de pet namche gunto mithuye chagdwa tam docha gizina tagare khondru jina tagare jedang gizina teyungur mado pet teka semgi ni bo pet teka nyamba chigdwa tinga to hagudwa ngaso samlatan dugal nyoy ratugudwa nyoy hagudwa ratugudwa ratugudwa samlo tangora samlo yang te chapa chaya de pe misibe kechimore hi kore nisungdo yulamenala semge ranji osawa timanani luburwa sigdo tima
gondak semgi
ranji osawa timan namni luburwa asi tima sidigala semgi kyen tanda nyomong yiti jidong digete ta timare Wata tezo enipe luburuares kope kui semgi yunde mare semgi hyonre luburuwe zuzu kato yormado namkala ting kabanajin timbade namkala rajindu yoyina ko rewa gyayo marwa ko luburuwa inza samsalo meaja samsalo yo yungchagwa wata kanajin jenga so timawa da luburuwa inza ko nyimpo tene mea chaya yore sidugala chik samtang edwa
And so we should always, constantly think about this. Think about the two aspects of the qualities of our mental functions. When we think about love and compassion, actually, when we cultivate these kind of mental states, you yourself have the experience of thinking about how do you feel when you're filled with a loving attitude? How do you feel when you're compassionate? It feels good, right? It feels very pleasurable. We ourselves feel so happy. Not only that, we feel very clear. There's a clarity aspect of knowing that comes with this. It becomes very clear, very steady, and we have experience of this ourselves. And then again, on the other side, what about when we're filled with anger? That feeling of peacefulness and clarity before we had become so clear, that state of mind no longer exists under the influence of strong anger. Actually, it becomes clouded. We become encased in murkiness. We're no longer clear. And be it anger or great desire or hatred, whatever it is in the negative emotions, what happens is the quality of mind, this clarity diminishes and it becomes cloudy. And actually, we should always think about the afflictive emotions. And really, if we always think about how they affect us, what are they functioning to do to us? If we think about it, then we will really, really see what happens. We can see this in our own experience. And in the text called the Gyulama, the Sublime Continuum, it is said that the nature of mind is a great luminosity. And yet it is clouded by the temporary stains. And what are these temporary stains that cloud the nature of radiance of our mind, this great clear light? It is these 84,000 different negative emotions. But as it said in the Sublime Continuum, they are fleeting or adventitious, which means, yes, they are not a quality of mind, they are a fault of the mind. They are not the mind itself, it is not the clear light itself, they are temporary faults. And because they are temporary faults, they can be removed. They can be eliminated. Just as sometimes the clouds are in the sky, because the clouds do not actually taint the sky, they are not part of the intrinsic sky, sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are removed. And in the same way, relying on antidotes, we can remove these temporary stains that cloud the clear light of the mind.
Semgi yende yona kinzar chado urwa semgi ranjin le yona ko kadi na inde ne kadi na mi ye kontrojen de kadi na kontrojen chado urwa jaza luburwa yimbi tagi ko mea zoya yobadan tendi yudi kala ngone ngaso kale gyana gyabrin chogachi en chamba de niji te samutayina sindi tanda kyuksidela te samu korena semne jide pape yongaya 이 바자전에 깨와치마라 배 깨와치만 치마규된 띠규니 이 공필도 따내는 상기 사포도 도투야 이거 이래 연구도 같아 그때 빼면서 아주 셈라 조아케야당 셈라네 배 지데 연구도 같아 어때 이게 삼당 거래 배 민습에 깨침보래 아니 그래서 맞았다 차빈님 님이 사야돼서 류레드니 차바케 님이 되디 차율라 님이 균사야돼 미스베 개침보래 이나 님이 따투르스 따와잠기 방투거는 방투야 가보래 따테니 리가라 지코 콤팔레기 레브리 레기치레니 배 잡아슈 충충충충 견도 도나코 충충충충충 그래. 애는 이 견진의 란진진 충충 그래. 란진진 지상 슈치 충로들이 애니 진진진당 엔 타바통이 결로당 이게 예라 펜도용 거래. 때미스베 전부 차디요. 그래서
So there's an important point here. This mind of clear light that is veiled by temporary afflictions or temporary stains. We look at this word temporary or adventitious, which means they're fleeting, which means they can come out of nowhere and then again they can be gone. They are not part of the intrinsic nature of one's mind. They are not a permanent intrinsic nature of one's mind. They are not one of the qualities of the intrinsic mind. For if it were to be that way, let's take anger, for example, as one of these fleeting emotions. If it were not fleeting, it means that when someone were angry, they would always stay angry. If that was an intrinsic part of mind itself, then it would always be there. And that's not the case. And because they are fleeting, this is a sign that we can actually remove them, is a sign that they are fleeting. They're adventitious and temporary. So if we work very, very hard at this point in our practice, actually working with cultivating the positive qualities of the mind, being loving, being compassionate, bodhicitta, in this life, if we work hard in this life, then actually in the next life, when we meet with these teachings again, when we meet with these practices again, as soon as we pick them up, we will be off in no time, actually gaining great progress in the path very quickly, just ready to go, having cultivated this in our past life. And so this is actually very good reason for us now to be really spurred on and very encouraged into practice, knowing that these are fleeting, they can be removed, and everything that we do culminates in a life where we will actually just progress along the path so quickly. And this is a very, very important point. And
yeah.
so
Okay.
And so up until this point, while studying the way of the Bodhisattva, where we left off, we were looking at the faults and shortcomings of being attached and fixated. Especially we looked at being attached to the body, so physical passions and so forth, and other forms. And we looked at the faults of this. And the reason that we go into such detail of looking at the faults and shortcomings of being attached to something is because if we don't do that, then we won't see it. And it will be very, very hard to relinquish. And so now that we see the shortcomings of holding attachments to whatever our objects of attachment, we can now familiarize ourselves and really habituate this. Really meditate on this, habituate it again and again, and what will happen is naturally these attachments will diminish. And due to this, we now have the condition where we've set the condition so that our own self-cherishing diminishes as well, and our cherishing of others just further and further increases. And then through this all, our mind will really be focused towards liberation.
왔다 그선데 참되는 로그이나 아 개주개지 쇼로가 개주개지다 갱인 개주갱이다 겨숭이 레기어레스 아티 가르잖아 님이 섬네 터바똥이 일로케 바스 삽지잖아 테레 님이 섬네 균도 타네 더비 인덴라 균도 타네 단 더비 인데 유 벤저다 강가 연구로 아게비 참방 아당때서 건가 연구하래. Tezola any be Gyundostani. Any Tarbatoni Samutangures, Tarba Sidigala, Numone Targo, New Leda Numone Targora. Gulusunajinje, Leda Numo Zepetar Zede, Leda Numo Zegure Zede, Carja, Ledela, Le Village, the Miguel near, then an Miguel Ledre. Numon Zedigala, Lady Miguel by getting back wise. What a toast, what a tig, any pay, in a Tarbatoni yellow. Tarsate, Mazanati to Sat Tarsate, Leda Numon Nidre.
Gondak Geshe-la tarpadang tongi kilo?
Tarbatoni kilo, Tarbatoni.
Oh, Donir.
Oh, Tarbatoni kilo. Tegures. Tarbatoni kilo, Kewala Karikunguda. Numu teni members charge in Dugumindustaya. Numu teni members a chala, Mariba Mats Lugudoa. Mariba Mazogala Kargor, Maripe Mone. Ko Maripa said, Yulmuni Yoban Zin Yoanajin Mazuna, Nanajin Zin Cheta T Dilla Mariba Lagore, Zembran Zimbalagore, then Zin Lagore. Timela T Meazongendela Zame Bestawa, the Tonito Bestawa. Yulmuni to what do some men again. Chat mean that Razam Pa Tashar Mado, you going to tune the game, Junmane, Yanet ten tune the game. Then Tempachin Jones on the, you going to Sutu Yonegi, 10,000 in a mega, Tendaway Nepe, Tonito Tawala, Quayabo, Shikena, and the Tonito Tawate Guleke on the Gala, then it petacal dog to Gorwa. Then in Dogana, and it Tarbatoni, Tabala and Pe Sabanamason Jagorta.
Tarpa?
Tarpe Saban Jaguar thing.
Saban,
oh. Go to Gorta, Tarpan Royal, go to Gore. Then Miss will catch him with other. There's a best some tangua, so you do some tangua. Then Miss will catch him with higher.
So, in resuming in our text, we pick up in verse number 81. We're in the 8th chapter where we'll be looking 81, 82, 83. And we...
Sholuka Nire. Nishu Zani Zasum. Nispeji the Kazan Rosarwa.
Oh, Lasso, yeah. So...
Gejukeji the Kazan Rosare. I can need the Kasumi legger.
So we'll pick up on verses 82 and 83. We finished verse 81 last week. And now in the division of this text, this next section looks at, so what we've been talking about before, actually, and it looks at the faults and shortcomings of being attached to sense pleasures, to being attached to gaining wealth and riches and so forth. And so it's looking at the faults of these and then now looking towards liberation. And what is liberation? And as we've discussed before, and as Master Nagarjuna has defined it, is liberation is a state that is completely free from the afflictive emotions and free from karma. So as Nagarjuna said, is liberation is the complete exhaustion of karma and the afflictions. So we say here the exhaustion of karma, and we need to be specific here because there are both virtuous karmas or actions and non-virtuous karmas and actions. And here what we are looking to bring to exhaustion are the non-virtuous actions, the non-virtuous karmas, because 100% the afflictive emotions, 100% the afflictive emotions are negative karmas. So as we've been talking about in great detail here, the afflictive emotions, these are the karmas that Master Nagarjuna explains that that when we're free of them, we find a state of liberation. And so now in this section where we're reaching, this is a section that's really focused on a mind that really strives for freedom, a mind that really strives for that state, as Nagarjuna has explained, of liberation. And so in order to progress at this stage, we must have a mind that really delights in effort when it comes to the path to liberation. And so what do we need to do to accomplish the path to liberation? We need to be free. We need to eliminate the afflictive emotions. What is it that we need to do to be able to liberate afflictive emotions is we need to eliminate our ignorance and our not knowing. What is it that we need to do to eliminate ignorance? Then what we need to do is come to the understanding of the appearances and objects that appear to us, to come to realize that we have a misconstrued notion of that which appears. We are mistaken in the way we understand appearances and those objects that appear to us. We have the notion of them being true and solid and real, and therefore we cling to a reality and those objects. And actually, so what eliminates this notion is a mind that realizes selflessness. It is the realization of the view of emptiness. When we come to see that those objects that appear to us are simply merely labeled things, they are named and they are labeled, but from the side of the object, there is no true, accomplished, real, existing object at all. That comes from the subjective side for us in the way we regard it, in the way that we actually label it. And so when actually we have a realization of this and this arises in our mind stream, then we are free of this clinging to any realness or substantiality in objects that we see. And we have now planted the seed of liberation. This is when the path of liberation really gets rolling, really gets going, when we have realized that things are nothing but interdependently originated and merely labeled. And this is when the seed of liberation is planted, when we realize this.
Yeah, that see the dirodo. The pang banji gurching in the past the yelsi in that you penjor that tandangaranzo kokuyen again. You mopola soba take it off. Rido Kankina soba take it easy correct. Eh, Kazuchiana they were G gurching. Cool. Tandan Jorganize the UN they can jita and pay the lap. Gia pay mea chaya le lavo shiviches. Ko and impe mea chai lavo imba maseba. Kiwa chimadale tea to be cablape. Zuntai pe, Tong pe. That made a jenny tape, titi do the la Nimi Mongosa, Nipa Mobosane, any Yavi good Yawatunga Gucci Grace. Yabojimagina. The Tatikitondala Zunkure, any Jengi and Bay, then Daminachi Guda. You say Lela Vomido. The pay Chela, what a dealer. Chimbo means to Kundos, Chimbos. Don't chimbo maris, don't chimbo the Karana, don't chimbo Sidigara, Sindina Chimakanga Young, Sangi Kopang, the Tunchot Terwa. Randon to be a Shinton to be a young Angela, don't chimbo Lagore. Dig the don't chimbo maris. Any Tupe, Sechum Kang Bass, Dichevi Chazamji, Seki Sangi Nidrumna, then Chanchu Chupawe. That the Dubai, you mobile Cindy Koran legend in any pay Chanchu in the Sangi to be a cock by Yongo Mares. Yungal Chella Chanchu mess, any pay the 디톤 달레페 칼세 망부지 자고로마도 장 아니 중앙 첨부지 용그로마도 디 타니 아니 장축 세대 상기 고방세니 뚝투야요 말에서 소리 오늘 레도아티 장축 녀니요 말어 유산이 녀니요 말어 랑게 칼렉자 세메타니 장부 연된데 렘바지 렘베 연된데 메아서 우르마도 유산이 녀니 민도와 오늘 렘바르다.
And so now in our text in verse 82, all that we desire, the first line reads, all that we desire is sure to perish. So, you know, that which we spend so much time amassing, accumulating, building, gathering, our wealth, our possessions, our homes, and so forth, we think about that all is destined to destruction. It is constantly disintegrating. It is absolutely sure to come to an end and be and perish. And on what account we fall to hellish pain. And so in order for us to amass all that we do, our houses and our cars and our bank accounts and so forth, we actually engage in many inappropriate activities. We cheat and we lie. We misrepresent while we're doing business transactions in order to make a profit. For example, so many actually demerits and faults that we commit. And these are all simply the cause of hell. It will not end well. These things do not bring us to something that ends well. And, you know, we think about it because, you know, making money, making our way, amassing these things are not easy to do. So it's sure that we're not always upstanding in our actions as we go about our work. And then in the text, for what amounts to very little, we must suffer constant and exhausting weariness. So here, where it says what amounts to very little, so these are really not great accomplishments to gather money and riches. What are great accomplishments is when one focuses on that which benefits oneself and all other beings, which is to become enlightened, which to become awakened, to reach Buddhahood. This is a great accomplishment. This accomplishment here, gathering things sure to perish, is not a great accomplishment at all. And not only that, and so then next in verse number 83, with but a millionth part of such vexation, enlightenment itself could be attained. And so here we're working so hard to amass things in this life, money and, you know, wealth, the different possessions and things that we want to own. And because of this, all of this work that we put into it does not go, a fraction of that does not go towards the accomplishment of Buddhahood. It is not the opportunity to accomplish Buddhahood whatsoever. We suffer and we work very, very hard to do this, but it does not at all factor into the attainment of Buddhahood. And here in the text it says, with but a millionth of part such vexation, enlightenment itself could be attained. Those who crave are plagued far more than those engaged upon the path, and yet Buddhahood is not what they attain. And so those that are focused in possessions, they suffer and they toil, they really work very hard, but it's really true, there's no accomplishment of Buddhahood here because the cause has not been created, the cause has not been accumulated, so therefore there is no Buddhahood there. The only formula that works in order to be able to attain Buddhahood is one must eliminate the faults of the mind or the afflictive emotions, and one must work to be completely replete and fully accomplished with all of the qualities of the mind. This is the only thing that helps you, and this is the formula that actually works. All of this other toil is for naught.
Wata yeju kebji bate tepe nimi sambas. Ta ta tan tempo che de la guarda tepe nimi sambas de yankero ta tagi nim tepe kön shed sarda kön de ta ures ta kön de ta wala kön karkar yores de kön ta kön de zu tanga je gore. Wata yeju kebji bada. Nyalso sita nyawa sita ngasong sumyongura sonde nala nyawa ni sanyal get dang yani nyawa teni ida tunro ta tekiti ngor nyalso so sonde nala dungal samchenes dopanam la chondani ta tu tam metang yasa tang danam ki kyang femi phes ta ti karela gorjana chezang tana ngazu Sindin Tibetan Tala, Dianne Tala, any Zun Tama Chizu Dramina, you can Dramina Jene, Yungopo Sasha Gotiki, Naminde, Cardana, Pe, Kawachima, Dungal Mamu Yungures. These Dungalde, Sindi Enipe, Sindi Mazo Michi Tizuna, Tizu Dungal Samji Sigmares. Sun. Sendang, any pe, two tang, metang, Yansala Chungatang, any Tendigi, Philippe, Dungal Chay Yungres, Tizuda Dungal, Tizumal Chunchun Chagres, Sunda Tegedi. What a Tendigi, any pe, Namdam Mambungazo Dungal Yungurtas, Tendida, Yampe, Tenin, Yung Meganjin Dezel Lagomarda, Yula Chajin Chungurta. Susu Tsoegi, Yudik war. Yamambo Sane, any Dijane, Chikalagala, Milo Gel Tayaragumarwa.
Karila Ragmar?
Yumambo Sana, Chikalagala, my Guyos and they Chigi Jagmarwa. Use also for the Gandigins and Desan Rumidoa. You Kato in a Tichasi, Jan and Rugurmata, Chemido, Marni, Putumana Chendra Mother. Indigala, Indigi, Yusayala, Nimi, Mambo Samadane, any Samtang grace that they disungore. The Missive Nepochin Sungorda, the Missive the Mazo Samtang war.
Now, next we'll pick up on verse number 84. And so now we start to look in a number. There's an enumeration of the different faults of being attached to, like being greedy, being wanton, about possessions, different kinds of possessions and so forth, our greediness, our wantonness. And it looks one by one in different enumerations on what are the faults in being so possessed of such a greedy attitude. And here it says, reflect upon the pains of hell and other evil states. And so here it says of other evil states, and we say hell and the other evil states, and here in the Tibetan where there's one term for this, it's a term that means all of, so first of all we have the hells, so we're talking about the lower realms. The lower realms include the hell realms where there is much torment. There are the 8 hot, for example, the 8 hot hells and the 8 cold hells, many different hell realms within the hell realms. And then as well, we have the realm of hungry spirits and the realm of animals. So when they speak about other evil states, this means the 3 lower realms. Weapons, fire, and poisons, yawning chasms, hostile foes, none is on a level with our cravings. And so, you know, in this life, if we get caught up in materialism, in wanting, in materialism. If we get caught up in this, this is really a great, great fault, because it completely, we get completely caught up in it in this lifetime, and then in next, what happens, what is so what is the karmic maturation? How does this karma ripen in the next life? In the next life, there will be suffering. So for example, as we've said, in order to amass all of these material things, we lie, and we create divisiveness, and we misrepresent things. Many, for example, negativities of speech. And in the next life, the suffering, the karmic maturation of that is the suffering actually to be, as it says in the text, to be stabbed by a knife, or to be burned by fire, or to have the torment of poison and hostile foes. They won't even reach the suffering. That those sufferings will be small compared to the suffering that we will experience due to the negative karmas we create in this life to amass all of those things we're attached to. And so there will be much torment for us in the future. That will be the cause that we have created. It will ripen into that. And now Geshe-la is saying here that it doesn't mean that we can't have any possessions. We cannot have any wealth or a small nest egg. But what we need to do is be satisfied with that which is sufficient, and not always not always wanting more, wanting to have a lot of something. Simply be happy, have a house, have a place to stay, but not get completely caught up in it. Because what we're talking about here is the kind of cause that means someone is never happy and always wanting more. But as we see in this verse, it will just lead us to terrible torment in the future.
Bejaya de Zong, one doa. Pena, Miguel Lingambasane, Nyawa Kina, Nyave Tizemapo, Nyavi Zungalde, Dungal Hachi Nebi Chembore. Two Danasan, Tendi, two Tundishina, Tendi, sorts of swans in Gare. Young Lachona Uduna Kambalaba Chagre. She would then the Yunrimbunaya Yomare.
Are you Rinpo Yalu Yomare?
Yunrimbo. Pe dungal mangpo nyoya yo marwa nyawa kena nyawi dungal chimbo te gangla titso pe cheze ringbo pe dungal top chimborwa tenya tiso den pe phug marje suya de dembarta.
So really the fault of craving sense pleasures and so forth is said to be like drinking salt water. The more you drink, so you're never satisfied when you drink salt water. Actually, the more you drink, the more your thirst increases. More and more. You just keep wanting more and more. And so it's like that. When we begin to indulge ourselves in these senses and really indulge our wishes and our cravings, so it said we should not do that, because due to the non-virtue in this, the suffering that we experience in the hell realms is really, it's unrelenting. It's terrible torment. It far surpasses any difficulty or torment we might have from not having, like, being perfectly well-to-do and being rich and having a lot of material possessions. It will far surpass that. And so this is something for us to contemplate, that having the sense pleasures is like drinking salt water.
Yeah. Those lulu chicken be kampan karma nga chuji lulu chicken or lulu chicken.
Okay, so everybody please take a 5 or 10 minutes, stretch your legs. Let's take a little break and relax we'll take about 5 or 10 minute break.
Yeah. Dirta. Embala go gumba de tela subject ni tram go. Embala go gumba dala temba da shebas ni yung go. Temba da emba khazane gol nenson ta nenten ju de sungora yangur. Maso carpichule nenten pe ora carp pe yagajina tele nentem nembochini labu gures.
Carpechule.
Carpichule nentens. Oda
Yeah.
pe yagajina tele pe nenten ju de labina changlina pe panle jile zergachi gyabna kora gyabshagrwa. Zerga ni gyabna chugumarwa.
Zerka, Sena?
Zerka ngazo nil
panle
niril chi gyana kora gyabshagrwa. Ni gyana tempo chagrwa.
Oh, that's so.
Oh, tena jinje tape tempo chin lagore. Yangur nembo chini.
Lasso.
Oda ta sholoka palchura
Gyepchu
genga pade. Genga de kampa tangpo ni ke tempa de shi gore. Ten ta ndol samji tengore. Nyunyuji ludi sun gore.
Lasso.
Tini kampa tangpo ni de. Tethar ndolla ndopi yendela kyoche des. Ndopi yendela eni kyo atong. Ndopi yendela nyumbu me atong gures. Kyoche de embadane gawa kes. Embatena gawa kegri. Gawa gom gures. Karchena tigin sem raptu sem kitane jinitu gutu gores. Jinitu bina ta tongi toya la le labo shucha gorwa. Wata tendi dekola ti tembada ta dini ti dini gishe gore. Wata tere.
So now we're entering the division on the excellence of depending on solitude, where we first look at really re-emphasizing, making our understanding of the excellence of solitude very stable. And in order to do that, then it's said that in the positive karmic activities, we really need to emphasize them. We have to really be fastidious about when it comes to the positive activities, the positive karmas. And so here we come to the point where we are re-emphasizing, meaning we've already visited this, we've already talked about the qualities and benefits of going to solitude to do practice, but here briefly once again it's revisited and re-emphasized. And we look at the first 2 lines here, verse number 85. So revolted by our lust and wanting, let us now rejoice in solitude. And so we've talked about, so we have just visited all of the shortcomings of being wanton and passionate and attached and greedy and so forth. But now let's again look at retreating into solitude. So the first line is about relying on antidotes to turn back and eradicate our greed and wanting. And secondly, going to a place to practice, happily going to solitude to practice. And why is it that we should be so encouraged on into going to a solitude, a place of solitude? Because in a place like this, we can really single-pointedly work on our practice of Shane or calm abiding meditation. And if we accomplish calm abiding meditation, then it said the realization of emptiness now comes easy, much easier. And so this should be very encouraging.
Ota Sholoka Gaju Kengi Kampa Chimani Dada, Gadu Bateke Karasi Gordon, Embeni Chitapun, Embala Kandisi, Degu, Embe paying Kareva, that is Shigore. Certain Yomu, Tombatan, Jivi, Nakan, Nantun Tana, a Kalden, Oton Senden, Silwai, Yambedole, Kansa, Yamgawar, Dame Jivin Nilu, Yobai, Jenla, Pendant Simshi Chaparche, said Sundo. Tape, take Karela Gorzana, Ta, Ko, you penjure and the Tom Kurlugu Galpose the Dag, Galpo Penjure Cheshotalat, Tom Kurlugu Galposigor, Nampenani. Tom Kurlugu Galpon Delta Travaji Yenayam, the way in the Lape, there was on launch Yorde, T. Tubala, Tape, Tapse, Tape, Galfam, Rajin Galfam, Shushin, Tubugorwa. You penjure ticket. What that? Any cheats about a zengi, Chadangi, Kenjin, Tenipe, Numo Mambuj, Namingi, Jin Mambujung Grace. What that Tindi Indugana? One leper, Kalpatan then they can. Anipe, ta, Pentita, Zanamido, Tumbachum then the Zanamido, ta take it, Kapatan then they can tape, the Shin. Zandengi, Tijuba Silena Jinchen, Anipe, Shindu Yawe, Tape, Ne Embatene, Ne Emba, Veloke Kansan, Nyangwa, Idon Watone, Damepene, Hatan, Damepene, Jambuji, Tendil and Nene, Lung, Te Karswari. Zejin Idon, Jijin, Chanjuki Semgom, Jempen, Samlotane, Dusjene, any Sim. Rajin Nelma Star Semgi Rajin de Hakwajin Nel Jorzegdwa Nel Jorze de Semgi Rajin Nelma de Hakwajine Tila Nipe Jambachini Jorwachini Tigule Kiavachini Motubachini Oda Dusene Anibe Embateni Tendige Anibe Tardunas Sangi Kupansanamido Oda Semgi Diki Tarduba the Titoni Yungre is a Sungudwa. One the Nicola embassing the Shibuji Kachambore is a Sunguanta.
So now in the last two lines of 85 and all of 86, we now look at, well, now going to this place of solitude, retreating to a place of solitude. What's the benefit? What are the good qualities and what is the benefit of doing that? And here we read in the text. Now let us, in places of empty of all conflict and defilement, the peace and stillness of the forest, happy those intent on others' good who roam in pleasant places formed of massive stone, refreshed by moonlight, sandal-scented beams, by gentle woodland breathes soothed. And so what is this saying here? If we think about, for example, someone who is very rich, someone who is very well off and well-to-do, we have this term within the Buddhist philosophy where they talk about the one who is very rich and privileged as the wheel-turning king, as rich as a wheel-turning king. And even though all of the sense pleasures are fully there, actually, this is not a place of great happiness to achieve such riches and position as the place of a wheel-turning king. There are so many difficulties in order to reach this kind of a standard. There are so many conflicts that one has and debates and afflictive emotions that come into play in order for one to gain such great riches, as it says in our text. the place of solitude is a place of free of any and empty of all of this conflict and defilement. And so, and now the peace and stillness of the forest. So those now that have the great fortune of retreating to a forest that is peaceful and has the scent of sandalwood. It is a place that is relaxed. It is a place that's beautiful. It is a place that's quiet. It is a place that's gentle. It is a place that has just a quiet hum of smooth breezes. Now, what is it that we do in a place like that, free of all conflict and affliction? We now settle in to cultivating a mind of bodhicitta, a mind of altruism, a mind that thinks of others, a mind that settles into its own self-nature. There is the term of yoga or yogi, and this, what the yogi practices actually in Tibetan, it is called connecting. So there's two parts, nal and jor. And jor is to connect with, and nal means the very nature of mind, mind itself. It is mind itself that we connect with in this beautiful, quiet, gentle forest. And so we think about practicing in this way. All of the things that lead to Buddhahood actually also in that very moment bring us to such peace and happiness as we're practicing them. And, you know, so understanding what we practice and what is the benefit of going to such a place is so important.
Didn't want to be in the race. That is Karazana. Kazon Shinjung Putatu, Kanto Chisi, Deneshi. Yunzin Sue Dungalfang. Stepamer Papayo Jong, the Sundua. But that is Karazungwazana. Kampa Tompa, that me mesa, Kampa Tompa. Yani Shinjung, Pe Shin, Jombatenepe. 신동 준비하라. 그거 심부 젠데야. 야니 리푸 자푸 사푸 부바스다 답에 캡로아 되기디. 어다 딘디 나라 가르잖아. 수수 딘데나 네네니 지시 수수에네 빼 개회처럼 가서 뚝뚝지 내시 이제 망부 매봐 아니 강 용진 수에 동알 판스다 빼 용순진배 수술라인배 동알 때좀 빵 맞지니 아니 젠랄 뜨바마가 수술 라왕고 토네다 빠에 장네 융아 있음 빠요 받지네 아니 루시네 딘데기 접아 융아 있음 접아데 빠요기 접아지 차그레스 빠요 봐 와다때 딘데 니가라 시보지 다 같이 엠비네디 왕토비 인덴텐디어를 라브레.
So now in our next, in the next paragraph, then it's verse 87. Sorry about that. Yep, verse 87. This verse speaks to how when we retreat to such a place and practice in such a way, we gain a self-control and an autonomy that is unmatched, because when we go, for example, to such a quiet place, retreating from everything and everyone, there's no one ordering you around. There's no one speaking in your ear and telling you what to do. And we gain a great autonomy in that place. And so verse 87, In caves beneath the trees and houses left abandoned, may we linger long as we might wish, relinquishing the pain of guarding our possessions. Let us live in freedom, unconfined by cares. So here it makes mention of several options to retreat into in this place of solitude. For example, maybe an old abandoned dwelling, or into a cave of some kind. It could be a rocky cave or kind of a grassy cave hollow, hollowed out, or in the hollow of a big, like a hollowed out tree. We find ourselves and we settle in, abiding there. And abiding in that empty place, kind of encased within that cave or hollow, we work towards virtue, towards the direction of virtue to the very best of our ability. Focused in virtue, completely accomplishing it in a way that we are free from any pains and any sufferings. And in a way that we are completely in control and very conscious of our own activities of body, speech, and mind. We have gained a power and an autonomy over ourselves. Now we are very conscientious that all of our activities in this beautiful and empty place are completely controlled and very virtuous.
다 초시비인된 시고래 초시비인된 시고다 랑라 유벤저 가자 여바달라 오 몸바지네 오 디아보레 디 섬다 디가 얀 더바 추루 마타지니 초시바데 베미스베 인된 요레라브레 다딜라고레 라왕초지 차멜라스 간수 수소 연대게 뉴윤지마데 메나 또 수술라는 배 왕자열에 차장 아니 뒤에는 배 가서 차밖에 오마레스 강당양은 델메베 초시 제저 강임바 왕분이니 땡에 가스 왔다 땡데게 아니 초 다그 제뉴뉴지 제이나나 고이나다 수수 lui troyagi quechi robandanche ze choshiba nyunji kanje toshi mitriyaji tende choshi de du chene ani tarbatangi gi los samdane du sunde de ani be gevichola chanjugi semda tongi tobel tawada tezule minam kyanden de ta ngone jenji jene la chambada gejin lo so ba pe la tuche de gela tindi kawate yo marella bare 세상으로 tindi jin de tindi ge gevichola du samtaina susupe misiba kalba zampure sepe misiba yabore labgorda wambul technical la wambu yejin la tindi kokop thoye de pe khabore labre ingone rowa.
And so verse number 88 speaks about the virtue or the good quality of being content, of contentment, meaning whatever we find our standing at or our financial standing, whatever we're at, just being satisfied with it, being satisfied with whatever you have, looking at what you have and saying, perfect, this is what I've got, this is just what I need. Perfect. Just being content. And here in verse 88, the first line says, to have such liberty unmarred by craving, loosened from every bond and tie. And here it says liberty, to have such liberty, because it is a freedom to be free from desire, to be free from attachment. We are free from it. It's like gaining a great liberty, a great freedom. And here we're in a place with no desire, which now we have these wings of freedom. And a life of such contentment and such pleasure, even Indra would be pressed to find. And so being there, as it says, loosed from every bond and tie, a life of such contentment and such pleasure, meaning that you're surviving on very few things. Not many necessarily possessions or substances that you have with you, but what you do have is the practice of liberation, the practice of bodhicitta, the practice of the view of emptiness. And these are, such incredible benefits and pleasures. And as it says here, Indra or Vishnu would be hard-pressed to find anything so pleasing, anything so wonderful. So to be in such a place, liberty, free from being attached to anything, being satisfied with everything you have, is such an incredible position to be in, that even the likes of Indra and Vishnu would find it hard to find such a favorable opportunity.
균도 타야 되죠. nempu치는 숭도. 오다데 대차네. 다 MB 파인트 숭산이다. 예, sabje sumba de carreresne. 아니 jini chiltar gombe sul sendere. 다 때 leptiore. jini chiltar gombe sul. jini. 다 jini chiltar gombe sul sede te leptiore. 다 때 인디가라. 다 ngoma 가르쳐오래. 준주기 답하게 라젠 냠바 아니 라젠 제파스다 다 sabject tam이 온 거래. 라젠 냠제기 셈케한테 다 뭐마데 숨고래. 디니. 당문에 가서 집 원에다 란 떼어내다 란친진 견데서 들어온 튀는 거로 망해. 와다 땡디가라 다 원에 때 미시바 라젠 냠바 시디가라 카르삼도 거라. 나랑주 라세네다 랑이로와 랑레 젬바테도 때 대완도pan 란다레스 융알민도pan 란다레스 라젠 냠바 삼다데 때레다 대완도pan 랑냠 융알민도pan 랑냠 제산다 대완 미율지나 아니 다다 젠즈 시작이 켜버리 연제 첨부 제과에 민도가서 들라고 왔다. 라젠 냠바 아니 가르다 라젠 냠바고 오금술라이 지두 돌렌 포아타 숨버 검수 세게도 왔다테 숨고왔다 sabje 망부타명도 다테 투스체네 다 오데테리
오레레레레
테레테
야야야야
도르덴바 게버시바스 라젠 냠바 검수들라 도르덴바다 게버시바 니제 도르덴바다 도르 Anything, 뉴뉴지, 티 나 뉴뉴지 쉐야데 라거레. 도르템 바즈디. 다 이에니 제마데 예와치니 쉐기 인라레. 단 도르템 바데디리. 텔라소펜 남바이스 MB 윤든 삼체니 남토 니어르 지와탕 장주스니 곰바자시 스숭도아. 다 마르 다 거기 MB 연대 망보 숭으로와 MB 연대도 숭숭 MB 연대도 셴네 아니 다 엠바 텐디가라 루인 둔징기 엠바데 셰거죠 루인 둔징기 엠바 다 단다 엠바 셰디가라 셈남도게 엠바데 셰고거래 셈남도라 셈라 남도다 미데 차르모주지 뭐니 개회 쳐달라로서 시게 지다자야데 다때 숨고래 엠비연된 삼제는 남도 녀버 지와탕 장주스네 나바곰스 애니 남도 빼 드민다 남도 때네 마다데 애니 빼 남도 빼마 지주네 애네 그 짱짱을 장주 기sem데 빼저 장축 세디가라 장 세디가라 가르데 녀모 바다 애니 시지티바 빠차도 제바 장시 따바들 장시 거와 규메어서들 장시 거와 춥세디 장부연데 귤레담 바들 춥시 거와 오다 텐데게 장축기 연된들라 빼 그뒤나 셈 아니 빼 오공고래 자때 숨래 너르드잖아 조조 셈 남도래 엠바데 조지 숨거다 다지 바게 엠베네 텐데가라 루인 든징기 엠바 든지 망부여나 가와도 두고 말와 오다 때시 거래 자자 셈 남도래 엠바 루인 든질레 엠바즈데 따페 시부지 자기 전부도 저전 디디가 시부 nem부진 숭도 아다때 꽤 전부 차고 그러지
So now in verse number 89, we look more at the quality of solitude and what exactly we're working on when we are in that solitary place, retreating. And first we need to think about what are we retreating from, actually. So we retreat, physically we retreat from the busyness of life, but there's also mentally we need to retreat from something also. And that is we need to retreat from the busyness of the mind, the discursiveness of the thinking conceptual mind. We need to retreat away from that, and we need to focus on virtue. So we're retreating physically. We've already discussed that, going, as we just discussed, going to, for example, a cave and a quiet place in the forest. This is retreating the body away from busyness, and now we need to retreat the mind from all of its conceptual thinking. And in the text it says, reflecting in such ways as these upon the excellence of solitude, pacify completely all discursiveness and cultivate the mind of bodhicitta. And so it says that we should pacify our discursiveness. This is the first thing that we're working on. So we're working with the mind in a way that the discursive thinking begins to diminish and works to come to a stop. And as it says here, to cultivate the mind of bodhicitta. And in Tibetan, the mind of bodhicitta is Jang Chup Sem, and it has two parts, Jang and Chup. Sem is the mind, but Jang and Chup, we look at that because the very way to say the word of bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment, actually describes exactly the process of attaining that very thing. First is Jang, and Jang means to purify or to clear away. And what is it that we're clearing away? We're clearing away the afflictions and the obscurations. So we're completely purifying these in the process of gaining the mind of enlightenment. And Chup means what are we encouraging on to complete fullness or repleteness. And that is all of the positive qualities of the mind. And so we have this Jang, this cleansing, and the Chup, the becoming replete. And so this is a process of meditating on bodhicitta, the mind of altruism. So we go into this empty place in order to work with the mind. And actually that's the principal aspect of our practice. Yes, we do need to retreat away from busyness of life, all of the hubbub, because we're not going to be able to practice and concentrate in a place that is busy and just full of all our ordinary activities. But once we do that, the principal thing really is about this working on the mind and having these afflictions, or as it says here, completely pacify our discursiveness. And these are the very things that we need to do. These are the preliminary or prerequisites of what we do in order to then work to accomplish different kinds of meditation, for example, such as Mahamudra or the Great Perfection.
Wada Chanchuki Semne number comes at the Chanchuki Sem sing the she was a Kachimbuchadiore. Chazan Chanchuki Sem de la Dumba Nilenji Gore, Dumba Ni Raju Jenten Ting in Dumbe. Jenten Ting in Dumbat Yoya the Karayon Gore. So Niji Chambo, the Niji Kunilani. Chanchuki Sem get Zawa Zawa the Niji Chigor, Niji the Zawa Chion Gore. Tizawa Kare. Dodigen na yore. Te zawa nijin dees. Chanchu ki sem te tenda juji de chanchu ki sem. Chanchu sem ki zawa de ninje rees. Oda ninje ki semjen le mi se sungdoa. Loben singi zangbo yenang zer de yore. Tinala di sungdoa. Ninje ki semjen le mi se. Sherab ki chanchu le mi se. Jenden tengi dumba de chanchu le mi rees. Karzana sherab de ko Jenden Chebala Sementangi, Numon the Narung imina Tongura, Numon the Narungimba Tongore, Semi Gunde, Mea Chayimba. In Chur of the Namjik Sherabudoni, Hakura Mother, Zenda Hakoya Marwa. Chaza Tima the Luburu Yimba, Tima the Narungimba, Chanchu Toruimba Hakoya, Sherabton to Grace. Sherab ki chanchu le mise. Niji ki semjen le mise. Tene dumba tingi reta. Rando tingi ki dumba tang, jende tingi ki dumba tingi. Rando tingi dumba te to niji kune langi ore. Jende tingi dumba te sherab kune langi ore. Sherab ki.
Rangdun di kondak di
Niji ki kune langi ore. Niji.
Di rang.
Rangdun tingi ki dumba.
Laso.
Wata chik tangpo karse gore. Niji simchen niji sedugala simchen nyam thapadala rewatan dende ki dungal da talde ki rojirwa. Niji sedugala simchen pe khagib ki simchen damje ani pe dungal nar degende dungal rana chimaru nyam badela ninji sigore. So di dawa dhaki chao nyambe lo dela yani laksam sigore, niji laksam. Dile nipa cheru songgendela en chanchu ki sem sigore tape. Moni chena? Kanchi chanchu ki sem side niji ngo kompel de niji minam yongsu zon degende, niji chamba de niji minam yongsu zon degende chanchu ki sem sigore. Ota di indugala chanchu ki sem de shivoji kechimbo chagore. Wada chanchuki sem samlo yawo dana yani tabshi nika di nyamlin zung dundeli yongore pe misibe yabore pe kechemborde kazan yarumbaje chanchuki sem keyagi pagi di nangson wada tezo yani yandu sem kegi yana ko pe penda yongore ani locale kale ani kompa lege ani chanju semla kwa chaila penda yore shuji penda chambora oda dusre kanjang aso chanju ki sem khonanji rabra yaboji majuna chanju ki sem gomzana da khaborwa
ninje mapa
chanju ki sem la kwa chanju ki sem la kwa machana chanju ki sem gomya khaboji kirwa chanchu ki sem la kwa chawa de pe misiu ke chimbores.
Laso. Ani dine the pecha karire the jang the ninje
semjen le mi.
Yeah, the pecha lung kare.
Di dire lubun singe zambo yenang zede ngoto yen dawa yenang.
Ngoto yen.
Yenang yengi nawa.
Okay. And so So that was the meaning of the mind of enlightenment, Bodhicitta, Jangchup in Tibetan. And this is really, Bodhicitta is so incredibly important. And it says that there are two parts to bodhicitta. There are two aspirations or two parts of bodhicitta. It's the compassion that focuses on sentient beings and the wisdom that focuses on enlightenment. And so, although it is one topic, bodhicitta, there is two aspects that really fulfills what an authentic bodhicitta is. And because actually the wisdom aspect focuses on that in order that we are able to accomplish being's benefit, then actually we must have the mind of bodhicitta. And if we really want to accomplish being's benefit, if we want to help others, then we need to eliminate the faults of the mind. And without wisdom, we won't see what the faults of the mind are, actually. So we need wisdom in order to accomplish other beings' benefit. And so we need to purify these stains of the mind, these impurities of the mind, and bring about this bodhicitta. And then also it is said within the scriptures in one of the treatises on in regard to the ornament of realization that that wisdom, that in order to benefit, in order to be of benefit oneself, one needs to focus on the wisdom of gaining enlightenment, and then for the benefit of that's for the benefit of others, and for the benefit of self, one works on the compassion for sentient beings. So there's two aspects: the wisdom that focuses on enlightenment, and the compassion that focuses on sentient beings. So we say the compassion that focuses on the sentient beings, and let's look at this aspect. So we've talked about why we need wisdom. We need wisdom to see the faults that we want to eliminate, but now the compassion that focuses on sentient beings. And so we say this aspiration prayer: may all beings be endowed with happiness and may they be free from suffering. When we wish and aspire that sentient beings are free from suffering, this is compassion. This is the mind of compassion. When we really and truly wish that others are free from suffering, this is authentic compassion. Now, when this authentic compassion grows and grows and grows, and it becomes fully matured and fully complete, this is now full bodhicitta. So compassion grows from the little root and into the full bodhicitta. So compassion, when it is brought to complete fulfillment, is bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is so important. And so we need to think well about that, because when we think well about that, we'll understand how compassion grows. And we'll see, we also know that bodhicitta is so important. And then we will be able to take both method and wisdom together, unified. And so His Holiness the Dalai Lama recently taught on how to cultivate the mind of bodhicitta in the context of understanding the bodhisattva vows and so forth, really taught about cultivating bodhicitta. And we should again and again cultivate the mind of bodhicitta. And because actually when we start with compassion, but when that grows, we actually bring it into fulfillment of complete mind of bodhicitta. But in order for us to actually even be inspired or really work to do that, we have to understand why we need to do it. And so we understand that the mind of bodhicitta is a mind of enlightenment, completely purified and completely replete with good qualities.
Yeah, that shologo gupchupate, that the temple to the Zada Zendu Nyambana, Tambuni to bed the commons. Zada Zenyaga, any pay, Danda race, top down Danda race, in the pay, Bezajin any pay, Samta Urogom Gures, the Kari Nyambares, the one the Banyambares, Dungal Minda Banyambares, the Dungal Nyambana, Tamja Rajin Sumurjas, Dindi Tamja Susu Sunkop Jenajin. 탐제 니베 수수나신제네 이 순급제니 오검구레셀라브레.
And so now we come into the part of the text that is involved in equalizing yourself with others. And a little bit ago also Geshe commented on this section, and so I'll translate that as he's already spoken a little bit about that. And so there are both the equalizing self and others and actually exchanging self and other. And so first we look at equalizing ourselves with others. We look at, okay, so there are self and others. So first we look at ourself and think what we ourselves desire and what we don't desire. And what we do desire is we want happiness, and what we don't want is suffering and difficulties. And that is what we're equal in, because there's self and others are no different in that. They want actually the same thing. So that which we want is the very same thing. So we can see that really between self and others, there's no difference. It's actually very equalized. And here in verse number 90, again, looking at how self and others are very equal. But we have to work hard to equalize ourselves with others. We really have to think about it and contemplate it. But when we do that, we will see that what they desire is the same and what they don't desire is the same. We desire happiness and we don't desire suffering. And here in our text in verse 90, it says, strive at first to meditate on the sameness of yourself and others. In joy and sorrow, all are equal. Thus be the guardian of all, as of yourself. And so here again, we are in our solitary place, quiet place, intent on our practice and focusing our mind in virtue. And in this case, it is the virtue of equalizing ourselves. And in this way, we should first see that we're all the same in our wants and our wishes. And we should meditate very well on not just protecting ourselves and our own interests, but those of all, which means others as well. So we should really work to cultivate this mind.
Dungal Dembares, Dungal Deba, Dun Deva Mindabadan, Dana Imbata Dembarete, Yinayam, Simchen Taibom, Mambuyores, Tila, Enibe, Ngong in Belochi, Here Young Midus, Dungan Dolena, Mambuyumuda, the Young Miduazana, the Young Grace Celebre. Karzi Young La Palaso Yawam. Namang yang yonsu sumi yusu chikpataras maranzo yuila kampa lapa ngo nzugu tense pe chashe mangbu yores ina yang lui sidi te kanga sobatela lui la gorwa ota najin chene ani tejin rowa thate redu das en tejin do tega najin chigi rowa sidi pe namra mangbu yore dewa dungal pe mangbu yore de Inayang, 함재 다진 너바 더바 다진 대와 너냠지 있어 오다 지천에는 배 섬전 단제라 레반드는 지마루 냠벨로지 기초그레스 대랑기 배 함재 라인에 배 늦음이제다 까투레라고 오다 디존 야보도와
And so in verse number 91, so we've already said that we are all the same and that we want happiness and we don't want sadness and pain, and that we are all the same. And yet, all of these sadnesses and pains and sufferings, they come in so many different flavors. They are very, very diverse. And so it speaks about the diverse sufferings and yet the sameness of it all. And here in verse number 91. The hand and other limbs are many and distinct, but all are one, the body to be kept and guarded. Likewise, different beings in their joys and sorrows are like me, all in one, in wanting happiness. So we can look at it like this. If we look at this physical form, we can find many different and distinct things. Arms, head, different fingers, shoulders, so many diverse things on the body. And yet we call it the body, and that it is one. It is one thing. It is the body. And just like that, just like them, all of the various beings also have their own diverse and different sufferings. They have their own stories and their own sorrows that are very unique to them. And yet what is one and the same is that it is suffering and that nobody wants suffering. And so when we do bring to mind, when we go to cultivate this equalness of our suffering, even though they're diverse, there's a very oneness in it, then we meditate in a way that says how wonderful if all of these beings would be free from all of these sufferings, the same as I.
दूसरे ताते जो नेम्बो जो समतंगवा दे पे मिसिब के चंब छाया रे सिरवा मरां जो ती ची जो लो छुया तो खाबो रे 가르잖아 가는 जो राचिन 시라 꼼치 전부 알아와 인디가라 배 양양도 समतंग다 시부지 내 전부데
So we really have to, so here we're working to understand this, and then we're working to understand what to cultivate as we're really practicing. And we read these words in this text and they are said so beautifully. It's really expressed utterly beautifully. And even so, sometimes we read these words and they're very hard for us to wrap our minds around. It's very hard for us sometimes to contemplate this. And this is because for so long we have been habituated to really just caring about our own agendas, caring about ourselves. We've really kind of dug a deep trench in this. We're very used to just focusing on ourselves. And so it's going to take us a little while to wrap our head around and really get used to switching, having a shift in our way of thinking where we're considering others so precious like this, because we're so habituated to ourselves. But it's so beautifully said. But because we're so habituated to our thinking about ourselves, we have to really again and again kind of encourage ourselves into this and really just always thinking about it now in this way, just as it's said in the text.
저거나 장주기 셈줘야 탑람 니리 윤리 맹아 등의 장주기 셈줘야지다 다시 냠제군의 장주기 셈줘야 단디 레빈 지와라기 수야다 다시 냠제군의 셈겨 장주 사바 신도 왕부 눈보기 다 장주기 셈줘야기 같이 시고
Deduction
냠제
냠제
대표 장주 사바 신도 왕부 눈보기 냠는 제지 송고하래
So when it comes to working with the mind, there are, a couple of trainings that we work with this, as we've said, exchanging self for others, equalizing self and others. So these are trainings of the mind. And here, Master Shantideva is working generally at this point here with equalizing self and others, seeing the sameness. And actually, this is a practice or a training that is meant for the disciple with very, very sharp minds, someone who can really, like a sharp mind, who gets it, and he can really work with this profound training. And so this is a training made for those of really sharp faculties and intelligence, equalizing self with others.
그래서 나중 냠제 시디가라 단다 보통 와서 라도 있고 수수랑 거 컨텐츠 진로자와 디게다 코르는 단다 바로 토마메베네 때 란도 란친진 진지나 란치고 삼단데 인자 토마메네 단다 바로 다 코르는 네바레 다때 삼로데 지볼로네 다 yin rang yus sajadala yin yus sajadala rang jane samlo jibu lo yare tomato rang yin re yomar yin rang re yomarwa tinga su tongye tongchu su yubarwa samlo de jibu lo ne da so maso topang yimban randa de sha rang dewan de ban randa Zungal mende ben randa, topang ban randa yimbala, ranchi putana, tanda perdu kurene lebra, kurlan rol tu biao mare. Rang le jen zo jene, jen jedugala, ranga din tsudi arwa. Jengi ka semje tamche ki tonda ine, semjen suzo semjen re deyor, semjen nala suzo tsuyi ondugala, tamche ki tonda jedana. 네, 진 심전 담제 코랄은 rol이오나 랑 rol도 그러와. 왔다 도스지네 진든 쪼제야데 랑든 잘 두야 띵띵이 숨고아래. 제한테 여름시 등송아. 이제 랑든 양다 지전에 장주기 섬곰숭도.
And so we talk about equalizing self and others, or exchanging self and others, which means to place someone else's interests more important than your own. But actually, we have done just the opposite from time without beginning. Since primordial time began, we have been placing ourselves as most important. We have been concerned solely about our own agendas, not about the purpose of others. And therefore, since primordial time, we have been circling in samsara. And so this is what we have been doing all along. We have already worked to focus accomplishing our own purpose. And now it's time to have a shift, to trade that for placing others more important than oneself. Now it's time for us to trade this. Now, when we talk about exchanging self and other and making this shift and making others more important, what we're talking about is a shift in our thinking, a shift in our perspective, a shift in the way we go about each and every day and each and every action. Now we're shifting the way we think. And so usually we think only about ourselves. And so here we are in samsara. It's what we have been doing. That is what has reified our situation. But now what we're going to do is, instead of oneself, we're going to place others as more important. but actually in placing others as more important, what we do, so we wish now, we want all, you know, so we remember that we're the same in that we want to be happy. We're the same and that we don't want suffering. But we've only cared about that for ourselves. Now we want to care about that for all others and see that that is their wish too. And when we accomplish that for others, what we do is we take them out of suffering and we take them out of samsara, but at the same time we accomplish that for ourselves. And also in doing this for others, we ourselves are liberated. And also recently when His Holiness was speaking about why we need to generate the mind of bodhicitta for our own sake, it's because the mind of bodhicitta is based on others, but we do it for our own sake because in the end we ourselves are free from suffering and we are liberated. And this is something that His Holiness the Dalai Lama recently taught.
Tende de la chanju ke semsing de shivuji ke chimbu chadiore. Wada karsa kunula matinjin galsengi chanju semde nala luna chanju ki sem gorm gores.
Kare gonda kani kale
Chanju semde kunula matinjin galsengi chanju semde zede pechejiore.
Oh.
Otinala kunula matinjin galsengi karsung verzena duna chanju ki sem gongres. Dupo yung lungal chedipe kangal chedikola semba nyamya ki nyanga yorwa chanju ki sem gomina semba thurnu guare sem la pe tonang legere duna chanju ki sem gongores kina yang ngazo pe kibu shibu yendegala sem gopa chen shibu chadugurwa hi jia tondala any kina chanju ki sem gongores chanju ki sem se gomi yondegala pe yang pe gopa chen mayimba sem haja tangmo any sem namjujin pitabu shibu shagore
Dangmo.
tabu sem tangmo tangmo sem haja namjujin jingo giwandu masong che sem namju yabu yongware gyungyuwang nuguwa mare chanju ki sem ki tuge wata tendi de gala pe mesiba katuina chanju ki sem da samutana suso sonam lapchimbu sagware pendo yare.
So regarding bodhicitta, which it's just so important. It's really a subject and a mind state that is so incredibly important and beneficial. Tenzin Gyatso,
Kunlama Tenzin Gyatso,
okay, Kunlun Lama Tenzin Gyatso, who was the composer of a text on the mind of bodhicitta, where in this text he said that when one is undergoing intense suffering, one should generate bodhicitta. And so the reason for this is when we are facing difficulties, we can get so caught up in the "oh, woe is me" attitude or in a lot of worry. We can just get covered in a worried mind, and this is of no benefit. But the mind of bodhicitta, which is a mind of altruism, a mind that thinks about others. So when you're suffering, think about others. And then he continued on in that text to say, and when you're happy, think of others. Have bodhicitta. Because when you're happy, you can also, so when everything is going right, we can become so self-absorbed. We can just become so lost in that very selfish happiness. But again, when you're happy, think of others. And then also, we can get lost in that happiness. We can get, just really distracted and discursive in that happiness too. And so this is something that Kunlong Tenzin Gyaltso has said in this text. And so also, this is something when we're overtaken by suffering or happiness, then our intelligence gets clouded. The clear thinking mind, the mind that clearly knows, becomes very, very clouded. And so we really want to turn to bodhicitta, because when we turn to the mind of altruism, the mind becomes clarified. The mind becomes so, so, so clear and knowing. And this is also another one of the great qualities of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, the mind that wishes for the benefit of others, is so important that every moment that it arises is just such an accumulation of merit, and it has such good qualities. So again, a very, very important point here about bodhicitta.
아니 리우숨발로다 장주sembe domba 주에도 소 리우숨베나 domba 주단도 소 리우숨베나 요래 에네 쟁토야도 소 테 리우숨베나 도와 아니 장주sembe 파인도 리우땅베나 요래 그래서 로거리 양도 로지제 두스네 티드 로여나 되는 삼단에 빼 펜보선 펜보야래 리우땅베나 디도와 장주sem게 기니 깨지기 크로에서로에 냠다는 레제 남게 세지 줘봐 인지는 레미크비 차지기로 지다 라담 장주기 셈 유리 깨어이나 깨마타도 아니 장주 세바 차로 땡기 가서도 장주 세바 차고 와래 라담이 남게 차저 의스기로 차고 와래 장주기 셈게 파 봐도 매번도 와 어떻게도 로다 때니 장주기 셈기 좋아도 만나지 와래
And so in the third chapter, in this text, in the Way of the Bodhisattva, in the third chapter, there is the section on taking the Bodhisattva vows. And so read that chapter, read those words. This is something that is extremely uplifting and inspiring. And also the first chapter that speaks about the qualities and benefits of the mind of altruism. Read these again and again. And after you read the words, then think about the words. You can't help but to be inspired. And then also within the first chapter on the benefits of altruism, the mind of bodhicitta, where it said that even from the first moment that bodhicitta authentically arises in one's mind, one becomes a bodhisattva. Having become a bodhisattva in that moment, then one is worthy of the prostration of all gods and men. So from even a second of true bodhicitta arising in the mind stream, then one becomes worthy of the prostration of all gods and men. So incredibly important. We can see how actually unmatched and inconceivable the mind of bodhicitta is. Understanding how inconceivable a second of bodhicitta is, there's no way one cannot be inspired to it. So again and again, go back to the first chapter and also read the Bodhisattva vows in the third chapter. So we have, let's complete the teachings there for today, but we can have some question and answers. Maybe we can go for about 10 minutes or so and, do some question and answer at this time. So does anyone have their hand up for a question? And I guess I should turn my chat on. I forget to do that.
Yeah, that wouldn't put a Laura Jesserwa. Yeah. Pemisive Pendore. Nembuja law, Yan and the Samta, 단다 삼다에 뒤서야다.
라.
그런서 단다 삼다에 그 뒤서야래. 아이 녀다서요 말에. 남긴 비지인라 거다 비지 쳐서 시다미도 와. 아니 저르데라. 다 단다 베 내연 딘디 두자지 임베 갑라. 아니 베 다 가르소래. 양 말한주 약합나라. 녀다 뭐보지 등용도. 다 첩시게 데디 란데 요래. 첩시 남반데나 약합시기 냥가 요래. 근데 이거라 답에 이제 경험 퍼즐 도야. 양양도 몰람 게데 페미스베 개침보래. 남지 짤던 아니 베 삼로 로조르 네네. 소소 예. 근데 첩시 남베나라 밀루야 제데 페미스베 개침보다. 아니 사 답에 첩시
Kena te ngol chicken ki dang dra way.
마게 잡아게 건조 먼저 찍기도 와. 또 진짜용이라 몰람게하고 와대. 빼미시고 그디나데 몰람게하고 빼게지 뭐래. 민디 또진 결합. 오늘 셀링 결합 되기지. 플란도나 나온서 전부리는 미필타에 결합 시작이 여러다. 미리중 그빼 플라탄 거. 그래서 야부 주네 말해. 그래서 몰람게하고 와대. 초수는 덴베 빵주네 몰람게 아니 뭐지 랑게가 와체바데 전주기 셈다 똥이 또이 짐베고네 뭐 몰람체데 베미스베 내첨보래.
오케이.
아메리카에는 전부는 메필다이지 이걸 갑차로 데트란도나 빼사래.
And so read these verses again and again because they are the practice of the antidotes that we need to be engaging in. These are the things that we need to be cultivating. So really use these verses as a tool, as your practice. And we have time now, more time than usual. Usually we're much more busy than this. Now we're not so busy. So use this time to read these chapters and apply them to your practice. And at this time of the pandemic, we have the difficulty of the pandemic right now. And also other difficulties that we now newly have coming to the scene in our country that are affecting us as a people and as a political community. So politics has now become involved and the government has become involved. And so you should say prayers and aspirations that any obstacles that we may have as a community, as we may have as a government, that these obstacles are turned away, that they are averted. And use your thinking and your power of prayer, because actually this is really needed right now. We have political difficulties, we have difficulties in our population, in our community, and prayer is very helpful, and it's so important that these things don't turn the wrong way, because if things go wrong, then we all have a lot to lose here. So use your practice, use your power of prayer, pray to the 3 jewels, say your prayers, then make your dedications. And also do this, coupling this with a mind of altruism, a mind that really wishes to serve and cares for others, also holding the wisdom of emptiness. America is a great country, it's a powerful country, it's an example for many other countries. So if we go wrong, there is a lot to lose here.
Yeah,
So, and now let all of us now say our dedications.
Jabe Side Bardo, thank you, Chi, Jambal Power, Chitra Kimbotam, Kundo Zampo, Teante, Tata Kundeji Sudalo, Pewan Deta, Tamjera Tum, to some Shepi, Kalatam, Mo Kanla Chutum about them, Rajan Gave Tawan, the Zampo Chucher of Waraki.
Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but may it ever increase higher and higher. And the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit, flows in your person, Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyamso, remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri obtained omniscience, and Samantabhadra too. So now I dedicate these merits so to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, thank you.
Geshe-la.
Thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Take care, careful, okay?
Thank you, Diane.
You too.
Me, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, take care, everyone. Take good
Take
care.
care, take care.
See you next time. Okay,
Thank
bye.
you,
Okay.
Diane.
Right, you're welcome. My pleasure. Take care, everyone. Good to see you. Take care, Geshe-la.
Thank you, thank you.
Bushanango.